I fully intended to vlog my experience at the Montreal GP, but I'm too self-conscious to do that. So we're gonna try and just do a recap instead, and I'll just like kind of talk about my experience and try and throw in some clips of here and there that I took while I was there, because I did not do a good job of commentating my life. Not a vlogger. That is one thing I learned over this trip. First time going to a Grand Prix, I had also never been to Montreal, and I absolutely love the city. It is gorgeous. It feels like Europe, but it's in Canada. Just so much culture, so much arts is just something that you don't really get in Vancouver at all. At the same time that the Grand Prix was on, they also had the Fringe Festival, they had a mural festival happening. So just so much to do, and yeah, just a fabulous city. Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of go through every day that we were there, and this will kind of be a record of my experience, I suppose. So yeah, so we left Vancouver on Tuesday. Our flight was at like 9:40, I think. And with the time change and it being like a 4 or 5 hour flight, I think we got to Montreal at like 6 p.m. Managed to find the bus that would take us to downtown Montreal, and then took the metro to our Airbnb, which was just outside of the city in Little Italy, right by a metro station stop, which was fantastic. If you are able to find accommodation close to the metro, do that, because you can get all over the city real easy, made track days really awesome. For transit, I would also recommend buying I guess depending on how long you were there, like since we were there from Tuesday until Monday, we bought the week-long pass. And so we never have to stop and buy tickets all the time, which there were huge lineups after track days to buy tickets. So if you can buy metro tickets in advance, do it, because there's also an option for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday metro ticket, so do that one as well, or like a 1 day pass that you can also do, or just buy 2 tickets at once and then you can have both that you need for the day. But yeah, do not forget to do this, because the lines after were atrocious. So yeah, the first night we just kind of got settled into our Airbnb, and then we decided to just stop at a little microbrewery just around the corner from us in Little Italy, and the beers were really good, but we did make a little bit of an error. I guess in Montreal they don't have flights. I don't know what maybe Vancouver's the weird one. I don't know. But in Vancouver we have like flights of beer that you could get. They're like 4-ounce glasses, and you can get like 4 or 5 of them. And usually you get that and then you just pay for that. But I guess in Montreal they don't have those, but they have tasters, so they give you a little sample of all the beers, and then you try them and then buy beer afterwards. And so we did the tasters fully expecting that, oh, we can just pay for this after. But our bills came and the beer wasn't on it, and we're like, what? So my friend went over and asked the server what it was about, and he said, oh yeah, no, you guys don't have to pay for that here. And I was like, okay. So we felt kind of bad. So we ended up buying a pint of beer each after that and drinking that, because we just like felt so bad that the server gave us all these samplers and then we had never ended up having beer. So that was a little bit of a cultural difference in terms of the beer culture in Montreal versus Vancouver, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, the beer was really good. They had a really, really good Hefeweizen. I had poutine a couple times. This poutine though that I had there, so good. It was like a ducked poutine, and it had like the gravy was like a beer gravy, and oh, it was really good. I really liked that poutine. So yeah, that was definitely probably my second favorite meal that I had. Very, very tasty. We went back to the Airbnb and watched the end of Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final, which the Knights ended up completely obliterating the Panthers, which I felt so bad for. Anyways, this is a Formula 1 based thing, so like enough about hockey. But yeah, and then the Wednesday, we ended up getting up fairly early and we headed to Mount Royal, which is, I wouldn't call it a mountain, more like a large hill in the city. So we stopped by for some croissants, and I mean, I had a chai latte, but coffee at a little patisserie, and then walked along Mount Royal, and then hiked the road up to the top to get a nice view of the city, and then we just took the stairs down. So that was a nice hike. So after that, we went downtown and checked out Old Montreal and wandered around there a bit, and then stumbled across this it was kind of like a food court, but it just had a bunch of food vendors and long tables, and all the food vendors like sold beer and stuff as well, and you just like picked out what you wanted to eat and then ate it there. So it kind of looked like there's like a place in Amsterdam that was kind of similar, where just like a bunch of food vendors and everyone would go gather and just hang out, and it was kind of like a large bar kind of atmosphere almost. So that was really neat. I would have liked to have seen it in the evening when it was more packed, but I had pizza there. It was really good. And then we wandered, I guess we got a little bit lost on the way to this and ended up in Chinatown briefly, but wasn't craving any Chinese food. It was a bit too warm out. But then we headed back into Old Montreal and checked out the F1 store that they have in that area. And there was a Red Bull kind of party situation happening outside of that, so we kind of hung around there for a little bit. And then wandered over to the port and saw the Ferris wheel, saw where Cirque du Soleil was set up, and then kind of wandered over to another pedestrian-only street, and then stopped over at a little pub and had some wings and some beers and just kind of enjoyed the outdoors. But by this point of the day, I think we had walked like 25 kilometers. It was a bit excessive, so we were pretty tired and we just headed home, and we were thinking about staying in for the evening, but then my friend had the idea of going to a little comedy club that was around the corner. So we went and saw a comedy night. It was English speaking, which was nice, and Montreal is pretty well known for its comedy scene, so checking that out was really cool. Some of the jokes were a little off base, but that's always the case with comedy, so we kind of just took it on the chin. A lot of Americans for some reason, but they were taking the piss out of them, and then we headed home and to bed because we were exhausted. Then the Thursday, we headed downtown to check out the Crescent Street and Peel Street festivals, where they had like the F1 booths and stuff. And we got there early because we thought that it had been set up on Wednesday, but turned out it would be set up for Thursday. So we were a little bit early there. They were still getting set up. They kind of had, Peel Street was a little bit more kind of EDM. They had a lot more of kind of the Red Bull related stuff there. So they had a few like, have some sim racing. They had the F1 games set up there. They had some pit stop practice and a DJ, and then they also had a bunch of patio setups on the street. They had kind of an area that was going to be kind of a party area for people who were willing to pay for it. And they had a few vendors along there. Heineken was giving away free hats, so I got a Heineken hat somewhere. Except for the beer was ridiculously expensive. So I don't know if it was really worth it for the quality of the hat that they gave you, but it's fine. It was F1 week. I did not spare any expense really. Yeah, so that was kind of Peel Street, and it was cool, but Crescent Street was definitely where the vibe was. They had a lot more kind of alcohol booths there. They had a few like F1 related things, but they also had an outdoor concert. So every night they had a different, or I guess throughout the day, they had a bunch of different performances, and then in the evenings they kind of had the headliners. So we kind of wandered around Old Town a little bit more, kind of saw the south side of it because we'd seen the north side of it the day before. And then headed and had some good Montreal bagels. If you've never had a Montreal bagel, they are very good. So I had that with smoked salmon, and I was feeling pretty tired, honestly. I think that partially the time change and jet lag, but also just the amount of walking we did the day before. So we headed back to the Airbnb, and my friend went and bought some groceries for us to make meals for the track. And I just kind of had a nap and kind of caught up on F1 news so that I knew what was going on, because I don't like to not know what's going on. That night we ended up going to a poutineery and grabbed this enormous thing of poutine. Oh my god, it was huge. It came with it was a Portuguese place, so they have really good chicken and some chorizo on this poutine, and it was just huge. We got like 3 meals out of it. Was ridiculous. So yeah, we enjoyed that, and then we went back to our Airbnb to drop off our food, and then we headed downtown to Peel Street and Crescent Street to kind of check it out. And I think this was a good idea doing the Thursday night. If you want to try all the little activities that they have going on, that would be the best night to do it. There wasn't as many people, so we were able to do the pit stop practice, which was actually a lot of fun, and we were actually pretty good at it. I think we managed to watch like maybe 10 people go, and we were the fastest of everyone we saw. So insert clip of me and my friend doing the pit stop. And then after that, we did a little bit of the F1 game. The simulator line was a bit too long, so we didn't end up doing that. And I don't think we ever went back, unfortunately. I would have liked to try it, but it was always just a little bit too busy, or we were getting there too late and they closed it at like 9 or 9:30, I think. So we couldn't do that. But the F1 game was fun, and I'm not very good at it. And then we headed over to Crescent Street and saw a few of the performers there. They had an all-female band performing the first night. It was a lot of hits from like the 80s and a few from more recent than that, so they were quite good. Yeah, and just kind of hung out around there and then headed home after that to bed. And it was finally time for track day on Friday. So we ended up getting up pretty early. I think we left our Airbnb by like 7:30, I want to say. We made our way to the track. We were meaning to go to a crepe place for breakfast that day, but it was closed when we got there, so we had to stop for coffee and a croissant. And then we headed to the track, and crowds weren't too bad. We went the wrong way, though, compared to where our seats were, because there were two bridges that you can use to get onto the track. So we took the one that went to the left, and we should have taken the one that went to the right, because that one got us closer to our seats. But I'm really glad that we did, because we stumbled upon the bell zone or fan zone or something, and we just happened to arrive there when the Williams team drivers, so Alex and Logan, were chatting and having an interview in person. So super glad about that, because literally there was nowhere online you could find out when these fan events were, and it drove me absolutely bonkers. I could not find it anywhere. They did not have it online. I couldn't find any posts about it anywhere on any F1 sites or like anywhere on social media. Like, I had no idea when it was, and so I'm so thankful that we just happened to be there when it was happening. So we managed to see the Williams drivers, we saw McLaren, we saw AlphaTauri, we saw Aston Martin, and then we saw Alfa Romeo. And it was very cool to see all of them in person. Lando is very small in real life. I was kind of surprised by that. Yeah, they just look tiny. They look way tinier in person for sure than they do on TV. Yeah, and then I managed to grab they were kind of rotating various screens in there, and I managed to finally capture when the rest of the drivers would be, which would be the following day in the morning, like start of the morning. So I was like, okay, noted. I'm gonna get here early again tomorrow so we can catch that. I bought this hat that first day. It was $80, but I figured that I think I checked online afterwards, it was $65 on the store, but including shipping, it was worth it to pay the $80 for this hat, because getting anything to Canada is horrendous in terms of shipping costs. So very glad that I made this purchase. Although I was decked out in McLaren gear the first day, as a homage to Danny Rick. And yeah, so we wandered over to our seats, and there was a huge crowd. Grandstands 11 and 12, they need to figure some stuff out for that, because there is one bridge that goes to that area, and it took us like probably a good half hour to get over that bridge, because there was so many people trying to get to their seats right before FP1. So that was very frustrating. And I'm gonna get back to the crowds a little later. So yeah, we managed to get to our seats and caught FP1, or at least the 3 minutes of it, before they frickin' red flagged it and then never told us what was going on. And so we're just sitting there for like an hour being like, are they coming out again? Like, what's going on? And you could hear like, oh, there might be a CCTV issue. They did not tell us anything. So that was very, very frustrating. And everyone was very sad because we wanted to see the cars and we saw 3 minutes of it and then nothing. Ugh. So yeah. And then we kind of just hung around there for an hour, watched a few of the support race practices. And yeah, just kind of hung out, played some cards for a bit because there wasn't much happening. Oh no, there wasn't the support races. Right. They couldn't put the support races on either because of the issue with the CCTV. Like, it was working before FP1 started and then just stopped working, I guess, and they couldn't put any of the other stuff on. So we had like nothing to watch for like the 3 hours or whatever it was between FP1 and FP2. So it was like, yeah, wasn't very happy with them about that. But then they announced that they were extending FP2 by half hour, so that was good. And so we managed to get back to our seats and watch all of that. The wind really started to pick up by the end and it got pretty rainy and obviously caught like the huge downpour. Luckily, that was on the other end of the track at the hairpin. Yeah, so we kind of hung around a little bit after, even though it was a little bit cold and rainy, but we figured the crowds would be pretty bad. So we watched, I think there was another support race that happened after that. So we watched a little bit of that and waited for the crowds to thin a little bit before we headed out. And so this day we ended up getting off a stop early, or a few stops early on the metro, and stopped by kind of in the Mount Royal area again. Wandered through the mural festival that was happening, which was really cool. They had a few, like every major street, they had like a kind of like a music going and some sort of like art, like mural on the wall or some sort of like artsy kind of thing. Like one stop we had like these like these people like moving around this giant snail, and there was a guy dancing on a house. Like it was a little bit out there, but it was kind of cool to see. And we stopped by a deli place with quite possibly the best sandwich I have ever had in my life. It was Montreal smoked meat, like it was very salty brisket with like mustard on it. Oh my god, was it good. It was so greasy and so fatty, but like, oh, that was a good sandwich. Montreal, they make a mean sandwich. So that was definitely the best meal I had in Montreal. And then after that we headed back to our Airbnb. We had a beer, and then we got dressed and headed downtown to Crescent Street again and saw Sam Roberts Band perform, which was cool. I don't know how well known they are elsewhere, but they're pretty big in Canada at one point, I think in the mid 2000s, so I definitely recognized a few of their songs. So that was kind of cool to see them play. But while we were out there, out of nowhere, it just started pouring buckets. Like, it was raining like crazy and everyone was like trying to find shelter, and so everyone kind of crowded out, and me and my friend were like, there's nowhere to go. And so we ended up running along Crescent Street, and this one guy was like holding this banner above his head, and so we like joined him standing under this banner. But by that point we were just completely drenched, and it just did not really, it let up a little bit, but it was just raining constantly. So we just like went back to the concert, and we're just like, we're wet anyways, we may as well be here and just like enjoy the concert. So that was actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. It made for a good memory. And after that we were like, okay, we're cold, because everything shut down at 11 every night, which was really disappointing. You'd have to like head into like a bar or something if you wanted to keep it going, but that was kind of disappointing. I wish they would have allowed the music and stuff to go a bit later, but yeah, we headed home and then to bed after that, I think. And I showered 3 times on Friday, the most I think I've ever showered in one day in my life, because we got up to shower, we showered after getting home from the race because we were kind of gross, and then we showered again when we got home because we were freezing cold. So yeah, and then Saturday, quali day, it was rainy. It's wet. Brought my rain jacket, but definitely did not bring warm enough clothes under that. So I was shivering like all day, but I think it was my favorite of the 3 on-track days. But we went to the track early because of the fan event thing. And we were sitting there, they didn't have like anything up on the screens, and they were like, wasn't really much happening. We're like, what's going on? And then a guy had to come up to us and say, yeah, so like the fan thing is canceled. How would we have known about this? Like, it was not online anywhere. There would have been no way for us to find out about this. So we got to the track early for no reason, and it was rainy. I'm so mad about this. Like, Montreal, come on. You need to like figure out how to get this info out there, or like tell people where they can find this out, because I was very frustrated about this. And I think my biggest disappointment the whole weekend was that we didn't get to see the other 5 teams drivers, and it was the 5 teams that have all of my favorite drivers on it. We didn't see Alpine, we didn't see Red Bull, we didn't see Mercedes, we didn't see Ferrari, and we didn't see Haas. So I was so disappointed about that. And because like I just wanted to see them in person, you know, just to say I have seen Max Verstappen in person, just to see like it's a it's a weird thing. I just like wanted to, you want to know what they look like in person, you know, like you see them on TV and you're like, okay, yeah, but just like seeing it with your own eyeballs is like a different thing. And I just wanted that. And we never ran into any other drivers all weekend, and I was so disappointed about this. And I mean, it was the weather's fault, like, can't blame them. And they ended up interviewing them in the garages and airing that on the track TVs, so we were able to watch it then. But it was just like, ugh, it wasn't the same. And yeah, I'm just kind of really bummed about that. So if I go back to another race, I'm hoping that it won't be rainy on the day that those drivers are going to the Van Forum. And also the Montreal one, it was a tiny stage. It was like barely off the ground, so you couldn't get that many people in the area. So I don't know. I think they need to change the location that they do it in and just make it more of a thing. I was just very, very disappointed by that part of it. Yeah, so instead of getting to see the drivers, we ended up going to the fan area, and they had like a few fun little things you could do there. So we went and did like the photo video booth thing, or you could like pick your team and the drivers would walk in and you could like take a little short video with them. And then we went, oh my god, the funniest thing probably the funniest thing all weekend. They have this like blast zone thing where you can like stand in front of a camera and then they blast a bunch of air at you, and like they record you, and your cheeks are going. So I'll put a clip of it here. I was howling with laughter watching this after. It was so funny. My lips, I got loose lips apparently. Oh man. Yeah, so we did that. And then we were just cold, so we headed to our seats, and I think we must have bought a hot chocolate or coffee like every half hour. Like, we were so cold. But it just like the camaraderie of being in that, and oh, it was really fun. I really enjoyed it, even though it was soaking wet. Yeah, so FP3 was really enjoyable because we were seeing the cars in the wet is so cool, because you get to see like how the aero goes off the car with like the spray from the wheels. And then we saw, obviously, we were in turn 1, so we saw Carlos's crash. I will never forget the thud when he hit the barrier. Like, it was a very distinctive, like, it doesn't sound like a car crash because it's all carbon fiber, so like there was nothing else that made a sound. It was just like the thud of it hitting the wall. So thankfully he was okay. Just seeing like a lot of people were losing control around turn 1, so definitely had a lot of action there during FP3. And after that we hung around a little bit, but it was so cold, and like you weren't supposed to have your umbrellas open while sessions were on, so we left the grandstands and like tried to find a little bit of cover, and then just huddled under our umbrella for like 2 hours trying to stay warm. Yeah, just like you could not get dry all day, and so we tried to dry off a little bit under the umbrella, waited for the qualifying to happen, watched the support races on the TV screen instead of in person. Yeah, and then went back to our seats for quali. Top 3.
Top 3. I'm gonna say Verstappen, Leclerc, Alonso. Okay.
And quali was so good. Oh my god, it was so good. FP1, like, a lot of stuff happening. We saw, I think everyone was out on inters the whole time, and that was good. We obviously saw on the TV screen Gasly getting terribly impeded. Like, whoa, Carlos, that was horrendous. And then a bunch of other impeding happening too. And then Q2 was so good. So good. No one knew what was going on with like who was on what tires. We saw Albon come out right away on the softs, and I was like, ooh, brave man. But he managed to put a lap together. 4 minutes to go and Albon is still I can say that I have seen Alex Albon P1 in a session in person, which was very, very cool. What a session that was. Albon P1, Checo, Stroll, Claire out, crazy. Charles was not happy about that, and we heard his radio calls on the TV, and we're like, oh boy, here we go again. Q3, obviously, we saw everyone go around once on the inters, I think. We saw Max go through on his second lap, and Hulkenberg go through on his second lap, and then Piastri crashed. And so they were the only two who were able to set a second lap, and Hulkenberg was P2, which was crazy. We're gonna get a Brazil 22 repeat. Hulkenberg P2, baby, let's go. Oh my god, I can't believe we almost saw another masterclass, which would have been so good. But then we found out later that Hulk got a 3-place grid penalty, and so did Carlos and Stroll and Yuki, and it was like, oh man, all these like really good guys that managed to get up the grid had to drop back, so that was a bit of a bummer. As soon as quali was done, everybody was leaving, and I mean, looking back, maybe we should have hung out around a little bit more, but we were so cold at that point, we just wanted to get home. But it was horrendous getting off the track because, one, grandstands 10, 11, and 12, it's at the back, and you obviously can't use like the way that the paddock club and the drivers get to the paddock is by taking these little pontoon boats across the river to their cars that are parked across on the other bank. But we couldn't use that, and you can't go through the paddock area, so there's only the one bridge that goes over the track that you can access, and they don't let anyone onto the track after quali day. So just like huge swarm of people trying to get over one bridge. So I think in those grandstands, probably a good 25,000 people, I would think. And so trying to funnel all of these people over this one bridge was horrendous. And then I guess there must have been some sort of emergency situation happening, so we had to let EMTs get through at one point, and then they had to block off half of the bridge. I don't know what had happened, but I guess it was on the bridge, the emergency, or it was on the other side of it, and they had to take the stretcher over the bridge and then bring it back, and so they had closed down half of the bridge. So we were like, we don't know what's going on. So it took like probably a good half hour to get off of that, maybe even 45 minutes. I honestly don't know. I was so cold. And so we finally get over that bridge. And then we make our way to the bridge that takes us off the island. And that was packed. And people were like doing some parkour to like climb up over the guardrails to try and get onto the bridge. And other people were just like going up the on-ramp, which we did. But one tip, if you're ever in that situation, go around the outside. Overtaking on the outside, much better. Do not go in the inside. I don't know why, but we just moved so much quicker. I saw some guys, like, it was kind of like a cloverleaf kind of situation, and there were some people like standing on the inside, and we had walked all the way out and around the inside, and like the guy had not moved. So they were just stuck there forever because like no one was moving. So we got pretty lucky in picking the right lane in terms of getting off there, but that still took forever. It was quite a long bridge, and then you have to take the cloverleaf to get off it on the other side, and that also is a pinch point. So that took a while, and then it kind of opens up after that. There's like a bunch of big fields on kind of the other island where I don't know if what happens there, like what it is. It was kind of a strange area. They have like that dome that has like the crisscrosses and something in it. I don't know what it is. Yeah, so then we managed to walk from there to the metro station, which everyone who goes to the track, except, like I said, the Paddock Club people and the drivers and the teams, all have to go through this one metro station because it's the only way onto and off of the island. Everyone goes through the one metro station. And I will say they had it like decently organized. My one complaint is that they don't really have like a separate line for people who need to buy tickets and people who already have their tickets, which I think would make it more efficient. But I think it took us another like probably 45 minutes to get through that. So it was like 45 minutes to get over that first bridge, half hour to get through off the bridge of the island, and then another 45 minutes to get the freaking metro. So it was, oh my god, it was crazy. I've never been in a crowd like that and just trying to get people moving, and oh my god, it was yeah. So like try and hang around the track late if you can, but unfortunately in this situation, like it was just so wet, everyone was leaving at once. Like I don't think it could get much worse than the crowds that we experienced trying to get off after quali. We managed to get back to our Airbnb. Yeah, we showered again, obviously, because we were freezing. And I think that night we ended up just staying in, and we had some of our poutine that we had a couple nights prior, and we also rewatched quali just to understand what had happened. And then we heard about all like the grid penalties and stuff then as well. So that was really good actually, and kind of had an understanding of what had gone on and all that. Yeah, and then just went to bed super early because we were just so tired, so cold after going through all that. And then Sunday, race day. We had meant to get to the track about the same time we did the 2 previous days, but we ended up leaving a little bit later. We had to, I think we were just both so tired, and so we slept in a little bit. And then we were planning on just grabbing breakfast at the track that day. Yeah, so we made it to the track. That day we ended up going straight to our seats because we wanted to watch the support races that were happening that day and just enjoy our breakfast and try and avoid the crowds because we knew it was going to be the most busy on the race day. But honestly, I think the 2 support races that happened before the F1 race on Friday were like some of the best action that we saw, specifically the F1600 race that happened that Sunday. It was so exciting. There was like a 3-4 car battle for the lead, and they were like constantly passing each other like the whole race. And then on the final lap, there was 3 of them battling at that point, and all of them like went side by side, and they literally had a photo finish.
Oh my lord!
Wow! Holy moly! It was crazy. There was 8 thousandths between the top 2 guys and another couple thousandths between the third. Like all 3 of them went across the line at the same time. It was crazy. That was a really, really good race. And then the Ferrari Challenge was the second race, and that one had a massive crash right in front of us. I think on the second lap, a guy clipped one guy and he spun out and hit the wall on kind of the inside because they had extended the wall kind of between the main straight and the pit lane, I guess probably to protect cars coming out of the pit lane. And so it slammed into that wall and then skidded and took out another guy who was going like still like pretty full speed towards turn 1. And then they both kind of ended up going into the wall together, and the guy that got collected, he like popped up and then slammed down. So it was pretty sketchy, and the ambulance had to come out for the driver in the car that got collected. So that was not good. But like, yeah, definitely the biggest crash that we saw that weekend. Yeah, so we kind of just chilled there, waited for that to get sorted. After that, there was still like a few good moments. I feel like the Ferrari Challenge wasn't quite as good as the smaller cars. But yeah, just seeing that big crash was pretty wild. Yeah, and then it was time for the driver's parade, which was good. Although I don't know if any of you like watched the driver's parade on YouTube, you can get it live. You might have heard like booing in the background. I don't think that was anyone booing the drivers. That was people booing all of the Paddock Club members who get on the giant flatbed trucks and go around. So everyone was booing the rich people. It was very funny. And I felt kind of bad because I'm sure some of them had like probably won their passes or like were given them by the teams or something. But it's just like people flaunting their wealth, and so everyone in the grandstand, boo. It was pretty funny. So that was as close as I got to about half the drivers all weekend, because we just saw them drive past in their individual cars, and like the fence was kind of in the way, so you could barely even see them. So yeah, so we watched that, and then we hung around, and I don't think there was anything that happened between that and the race. They just kind of waited around, and then about an hour before the race starts, they let people onto the pit lane. But like where we were at turn 1, we couldn't really see what was happening on the grid, which was kind of a bummer. So we just kind of chilled out there and got a little bit sunburned and kind of waited for the race to start. Okay, pre-race predictions. I'm going Max, Lewis, George. What are you thinking?
And I have Alonso, Lewis, George as my one.
Okay. So Max DNF, basically?
I have Max, Piastri, and Bottas all DNF.
Okay. Yeah, I was so excited for turn 1, lap 1. So once the race started, that was very exciting, but nothing happened. And then Max kind of sped off, but not as much as he usually does, into the distance. We saw a pretty good battle between Fernando and Lewis at the front, with George kind of tailing behind them a little bit. So that was good. And then we had the VSC when Logan had his issue, but that was resolved pretty quickly. So we're all kind of bummed, like, oh, we wanted like a safety car. But then George Russell comes in and he slams into the wall. We're like, yeah, George, thanks, man. Yeah, so he brought out the safety car because there was debris everywhere. And he went into the pits again. Thanks, George! Poor Nico had pitted the lap before that, so he got completely screwed. And then a bunch of other drivers had kind of pit around then too. And then, oh my god, when Ferrari didn't pit, everyone was like, oh my god, Ferrari, what are you doing? You big bunch of idiots. Like, why aren't you taking advantage of this thing? And I was like, oh my god, they've screwed this up again. Like, what are they doing? But then they had gotten ahead of everyone, and then race started, and like literally nothing else happened, the race. And we just watched. Max like pulled away, and like he was definitely had like a little bit of an advantage on everyone. So he was slowly kind of pulling away from Fernando and Lewis. I guess Lewis was ahead of Fernando at that point, and so we kind of watched them battle once Fernando got through on Lewis, and then they stayed about a couple seconds apart like the rest of the entire race. And then the Ferraris were a little bit behind them, but not too much, and they were only about a couple seconds between them. But as the race went on, the gap between the Ferraris and Checo just got longer and longer and longer, and we're like, oh my god, either Checo is driving horrendously or like the Ferraris have figured something out here, because they are pulling away from a Red Bull, and the gap just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're like, what is going on? The Ferraris are on old mediums. Like, how is this happening? Like, what is going on? And then the Ferraris pitted on their one-stop strategy and like stuck to their own strategy. And I found out later that it was the drivers who called this, so the drivers made a good call. Charles, for once, stood up for himself and made his own call instead of trusting what Ferrari were telling him. And I was so proud of him, and I was so happy that Ferrari made a good strategy call. So then they pitted, and yeah, and then they even on the hards, when Checo, I think was, I don't know if he was also on hards or if he had been on mediums at the end, and they were pulling away from him on their hards. And I was like, what is happening? This is not normal. But then Checo, there was a huge gap between him and Albon. By the end of the race, it was like 40 seconds. So you'd like watch Checo go past, and then you'd be like, and you'd watch the screen, see what else was going on the screen, and then you'd see Albon, Esteban, Lando, Bottas, Stroll, Piastri, like all going off in a row, and we're just like, go Albon, go! Like, so it was kind of a bummer that like none of them could pass each other, because I would have obviously had a lot more action in the race if Albon hadn't been the conductor of a very slow train. But I'm so proud of him for managing to hang on for like the entire race and getting P7 for Williams. That was so good. I'm so happy for him. Yeah, and then we obviously saw The start of De Vries and Kevin having their battle, I had initially thought it was Yuki. It was not Yuki. Thank God, because he would not make a move like that. So we saw them battling through turn one and see Russell kind of like take an advantage and get in ahead of them, which was good. I think it was like the only overtake that we saw in our corner that whole race. And then we watched on the TV as Nick like yeeted himself through, and then Kevin got caught up in it. They were blocking each other. It was so funny. Oh my god. And then Russell had to retire. Saw that, and then yeah, that was pretty much all that happened. The rest was just like every few minutes, every minute, like watching Max go past, and then the next two cars, and then the two Ferraris, and then a long gap, and then Checo, and then a really long gap, and then everyone else. So yeah, it was good that way though, because you could switch back and forth between watching what was going on in front of you and then watching the TV screen that we had. So it wasn't too hard to like know what was going on. I feel like the only thing we kind of missed out on was like Lando's penalty. We were all very confused when he dropped to 12th at the end. And we just had no idea what it was for. So, because you couldn't really hear, well, when you couldn't really hear the commentary, but also like it would be half in French and half in English, and so we didn't catch the French parts, and he wouldn't really necessarily repeat what was happening in both languages, so it felt like we missed out on quite a bit in that respect. But yeah, so that was good. And then we sat there until they did their cooldown lap after, and we saw everyone go past, and as soon as the last car went past, we like ran out of our seats and down to just right to the right of the grandstands, and they were letting people onto the track. Although initially it was pretty sketchy because some people were like climbing into the track before I think they were supposed to, because there was still like a few vehicles that were like speeding past on the track to get to the pit lane. I think it was like the security vehicles, and so people were like running onto the fields, and like some people were running down the pit lane, and I was like, oh my god, people are crazy. But they ended up being okay. I think a few people got tackled and like stopped from getting into the pit lane. But then they let like the huge crowds onto the track afterwards, and we timed it pretty well because we managed to get I'd say we're maybe like 100 meters away from the podium ceremony, so I was able to record it on my phone and got all that. And yeah, really cool. Like honestly, probably the most decorated podium ever, which is really cool to say that I saw that in person. We'll see if it gets any more decorated into the future, if this podium, I mean, I'm sure it'll happen more times this season, but it won't ever have Adrian Newey on it again. So yeah, that was really cool to see. Yeah, and then we hung around on the track as long as we possibly could. I went over to the Salut Gilles stencil that's on the track right in front of the start finish line, and I don't know how, but managed to get a photo with it by myself, surrounded by people who had like made a little opening, and a bunch of people were taking photos there, and managed to like perfectly capture it. And I'm really, really happy. I think it's like my favorite photo that I've gotten from the whole trip. So that meant a lot. I really want to learn a lot more about Gilles and watch a lot of his races, because he's just like such an icon in Canadian motorsport, and people just revere him so much more than they revere Jacques, because everyone hates Jacques. Yeah, and it's like Charles obviously did his tribute helmet for Gilles, which I thought was really cool. I'm glad that he was actually able to end up wearing it for the race, even though there was a little bit of controversy there. And then we kind of hung around along the pit straight there to kind of watch the garages get packed up, hoping that drivers would come out, but no one ever did, and that was a bit of a bummer. But we saw them kind of wheel a few of the cars back into the garages after Parc Fermé had been finished. I managed to see Ted Kravitz walk past, as well as Jensen Button, Danica Patrick, and Natalie Pinkham. So that was kind of cool to see them. And you could see they had a little segment with the Red Bull trophies in front of them, a little ways away, so kind of got a little view of that. And yeah, and then security came maybe an hour or so later and started slowly pushing people off the track, which was a bit of a bummer because I wanted to hang out there as long as I could. And I think after they had forced all the fans out was when the teams came out and did all their celebrations, so we didn't manage to catch any of that, which I'm a bit mad about. I don't know if they do that on any other tracks, but yeah, that was a bit disappointing. So then we wandered along the track, took a picture at the Wall of Champions, and then wandered all the way to the hairpin and took a photo in the Rolex sign with this big screen behind me. And then caught a glimpse of a groundhog, probably the star of the weekend. Gary! Yeah! And also a dead groundhog. I was kind of bummed about that. So one got hit at some point during the race, which is kind of sad. And yeah, and then we wandered off from there, and we had stuck around for so long that it did not take nearly close to the amount of time that it took the day before to get off. I think also the bridge that goes to the track on the left side, I think less people go over it. So I feel like that's probably the better one to go for if you are trying to get onto and off of the track. I think there was just a little bit easier getting onto it. There weren't pinch points getting onto and off of the bridge there. And it's also closer to the metro station. So I think that one's just a bit better to get on and off of the track. So I think if I ever go back to Montreal, I'll try and like stick to that bridge in terms of getting onto and off of the circuit, because the other one just was horrendous to try and get off. Yeah, and then after that we headed back to our Airbnb and then showered and had some beers and then headed to a restaurant in Little Italy, not realizing that it was a Father's Day event, so we had like a 3-course meal. Which was fine. It was really good food, so I'm glad we did that, and then had leftover pizza that we ended up having for breakfast the next day. But then we got downtown and caught the end of the last concert there, and we were intending to like go out and party a little bit, but I don't know, just like the vibe was off. I don't know why. I just was really, really tired, and the energy, it kind of felt like after that final concert that like it felt done, like it felt over. And so we were gonna go, oh, I know what happened. We ended up going back to the train station because we were going to go over to try and get to a different street that has a bunch of like pubs on it, but then the train was having an issue. I think someone had like run onto the track or something, and so there was no trains running, and so we were waiting for like 20 minutes for a train and none was coming, and so we ended up like leaving there and going to the other train line, and by the time we got there we're just like, ugh, the vibes are done, so we're just gonna go home. Which was kind of a bummer because I had intended for like the Sunday to be like the big kind of hurrah, we were gonna go celebrate and have some fun that night, but just like we were so tired at this point and the vibes were off, and so we just decided to head home and go to bed. I'm getting too old for that. Yeah, and then the Monday we packed up and left our Airbnb, ended up finding a hotel downtown that like holds your bags for the day for like $5, so that was really convenient. And then we went there and we ended up going over to Griffintown, I think it is, and didn't realize this, but there's some canals in Montreal, so we kind of wandered along that and just kind of chatted and wandered around and enjoyed the sunshine. And then I picked up some bagels to bring back with me to Vancouver, and we had some more coffee and then headed to the airport and home. Oh boy. Heading home was, the flights were at 8:30, but since the time change is opposite, we got home I think by like midnight Vancouver time, and then we had to wait forever for the train, but we ended up chatting with a lady who had probably one of the best experiences of her life, her and her son. I guess they ran into the Aston Martin team at a bar and they gave them paddock passes for the weekend. And so they like were telling us all about all the things that they did at the paddock club and all the people they talked to and like people they got photos with. And then they also said they ran into Charles at a restaurant. I was so jealous. Oh my god. But yeah, so like it sounds like Aston Martin like are a really great team, and she said that they felt like a family, and that's what everyone who worked there told them about the team. I was extremely jealous listening to all this, but yeah, her and her son just like were glowing and just like so happy, and I was like, wow, like it's incredible that a team decided to give them that experience, and so I was really happy for them and glad that I picked a team. I think like on the track and stuff, it was very surprising how many people were Aston Martin fans. I don't know what it was like last year, if anyone can tell me if they were the team that everyone was cheering for, but it honestly it felt like Aston Martin has become team number one in terms of fans in Montreal. A lot of Alonso fans. Stroll always has his fans, but I wouldn't say he's the reason. I think it's Fernando. I think people are hard on the Fernando hype train, and the fact that Aston Martin is kind of a Canadian team since Lawrence Stroll owns it, and so just like a lot of Aston Martin support. And then probably a slight step down from them is probably Mercedes. I think people really love Lewis in Montreal just because he's won there so much, and he always just has glowing things to say about the city. And then just a step down from Mercedes was probably Red Bull and Ferrari were about equal, I would say. Yeah, but just like fans from all the teams there. I wouldn't say it's very heavy in any direction, and people are all very respectful of whatever team you want to cheer for. I didn't hear anything about anyone getting into fights about you support this driver, you suck, like you support this driver, blah blah blah. Like there was none of that at all that I saw or heard of. So just like if you're looking for a safer race to go to, I think Montreal is pretty good in that respect. Like you don't get the throngs of like Max Verstappen fans like you do in some of the European races, or the throngs of Ferrari fans at Monza or Imola, or like the huge Lewis support in Silverstone. I think personally, like, I don't really like going to environments that are very one-sided like that, because you feel very uncomfortable if you are not in support of the driver that is very one-sided. So if you are looking for a safer race, I think Montreal is pretty good. Although I saw someone on Twitter say that they weren't very supportive of people with disabilities, which I think I would agree with. Like getting over those over the bridges that go over the track, like not accessible at all. And I think they have like a wheelchair area, but if you have any other kind of disability, like they're not very accommodating to that. So I think something that Montreal might need to improve for the future if they want to be a little bit more inclusive. Yeah, other impressions. Overall, just the vibe in Montreal, like everyone, it feels like a party. Especially on Crescent Street and Peel Street, like the whole week it was just, there's such a buzz in the city, and like there's a bunch of areas with like that hang like checkered flags all over. They have like kind of streamer type things hanging. There's music going all over, like tons of hotels, restaurants all over the city, just fully in the F1 swing of things, and you're able to get around the city pretty well. And just anyone wearing merch, like people come up to you and start talking to you about the race and like what you think is going to happen and all that kind of stuff. And just people so friendly and just really, really embrace the sport. And I really enjoyed that. I thought it was really, really cool. And so I think I won't go back for a little while, just because I want to experience some of the other races that are on the calendar. But I think definitely it was a really, really good experience, and I would highly recommend going to the Montreal GP if you ever have the chance. So yeah, this ended up being a lot longer than I intended, but yeah, that was my Montreal GP experience. So yeah, if you went this year, let me know in the comments down below if there was anything that you really enjoyed. If you've been to any other races, what were your favorite things about that? Sorry, this didn't end up being a vlog. Just not for me. So, yeah. Anyways, I will see you guys in a couple weeks for the Austrian GP.